Okay, so we're looking at, in a bit more detail how to separate substances. We've looked at some simple examples, getting to slightly more complicated examples, and this is one that's achievable but requires a little bit more thinking of how to separate the substances. So again, we're going to use salt for this one, and we're going to use some sand also. I've got in this cup here. Again, two chemicals, two substances you can easily get hold of. If I put some salt into the sand, or if you had another container you could put this sand into the salt, it doesn't matter which order you do it. It's just important to get a mixture of the two, roughly equal quantities of the two chemicals or two substances, and we're just going to simply mix them around again to get a mixture of the sand and the salt. And at this point you can ask the pupils, how on earth would you separate the two substances? Which again isn't easy looking at this straight away. Going back to what we said before, you might get people saying you could pick them out because you can see the differences if they've been using their observation skills to look at the differences between the colours of the substances. They could do that, but again it would take a very long time. There is a simple solution to this, and again I wouldn't necessarily have a jug of water sitting by it, but if you add some water to the mixture, the sand is insoluble, so the sand won't dissolve, but the salt will dissolve in the water. And just taking a plastic spoon or a plastic fork, simply by mixing the two together, and after approximately 30 seconds the salt should have dissolved into the water, and the pupils shouldn't be able to see any more white solid floating around. If they can, it's worth just getting them to stir it for a little bit longer, but of course the sand will always remain there. Now, you can leave that to settle and just to sit for a minute, just to make sure all the salt has dissolved and the sand will sink to the bottom. While you're waiting on that, you can set up a coffee filter. Again, any local supermarket will have them, or you might have them at home. And simply by taking another plastic cup, you can take the coffee filter, put it into the cup like so, and you might want to attach this round with an elastic band so that it sits in the cup. Okay, can be a little bit fiddly, so we'll come back to this just in a second. Okay, so we've set it up now with the filter, the coffee filter in the cup, and you should see by now that the salt water is obviously up here where it's dissolved, and the sand, you might be able to pick up on the camera, is at the bottom here. So one thing you might want to point out to the pupils, depending on their age or ability, is that the water here is clear, so you can see through it, light passes through it, but it's not got a colour. Okay, so it's colourless. If I take, say, a bottle of Irn-Bru here, a lot of pupils get muddled up between colourless and clear. So the Irn-Bru bottle here, or the Irn-Bru in the bottle, is clear, so you can see through it, light passes through it, but it's coloured, it's orange. Whereas this one here is colourless, there's no colour to it, and it's also clear. So some pupils get those two words muddled up, and it may be worth pointing that out to them. Simply taking the coffee filter here and this solution of the salt dissolved in the water, we can pour it through, and again you can point out to the pupils here that the coffee filter has holes in it which allows the salt particles to go through into the bottom cup here with the water, so the water and the salt can go through, but the sand is too big to fit through the holes in the coffee filter, and so will get stuck hopefully in the coffee filter. Now what pupils might do here is they may just pour off the liquid like so, and have the sand remaining in the bottom of the cup. So it's worth reminding them to give it a little swirl like that, just to mix it up again, so that when they pour it through here, the sand also goes into the filter paper. And as you can see, hopefully on the video, we've got the water coming through has no sand in it. And if you want a little extension here, although we've separated out the sand from the salt, some of the pupils might say they still can't see the salt, and understandably so, because it's dissolved in the water. But if you then leave that cup someplace, maybe in a sunny place within the classroom, in a few days the water will have evaporated and you should have the salt remaining in the cup. So you can show over a couple of days that the salt is there once the water has evaporated. So a simple example again of how to separate two relatively simple substances, sand and salt.